What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. I'm Bob Wankel. Anthony Sanfilippo is also here. Phillies swept in a little mini two-game series by the Atlanta Braves this week. And Anthony, it was a hell of a week to be a Phillies fan, really. I mean, you go down on Tuesday and you get to watch a good game for 6 innings, and then you get to watch Jeff Hoffman come in and torpedo things late. And you got to see some of the other premium Phillies relievers in action. And then I took my mom. I took my mom down to the game on Wednesday night for a Mother's Day gift, a little bit late, about a month late, and got to stand in the rain for 2 hours and wait for a game that I knew wasn't going to be played. So I guess shame on me. And then you were treated to just some tremendous offense and terrific defense in the little series finale against the Braves. So I'm sure Phillies fans are feeling good this week. That 13 out of 15 thing of the past. And here we are. I said we would not do this today. We're not going to come on here and say, hey, they're screwed, they're terrible, everything sucks again. But not a great week for the Phillies, Anthony.
No, it really wasn't, Bob. And we're going to dive into, what went awry in these two games and one non-game. But in the grand scheme of things, it was sobering in the sense that, and not that we're surprised by this, right? But this Braves team, and they've done it several times now this year to several teams, they just remind you, hey, we're the best team, not you.
Yeah.
You're not good. You're not as good as us. And look, the Phillies, I give them credit because in the two games that were played, look, they went down to Atlanta and split with them. And in the two games that they played here, they were in both games and very well should have won both games. Right? I mean, that's the thing. But the difference between the two teams is when you're as good as the Braves are, you basically say, nope, play your ass off, and we're gonna make you force you to do something wrong, and then we're gonna take advantage of it. We're that good that we're gonna make you make the mistake that we're going to take advantage of, and then we'll celebrate the fact that we made you make that mistake and really kind of rub it in your face. And that's what the Braves do. And you might get frustrated and you might hate them for it, but that's what the best team in baseball does. And the Phillies, they're a good team, but I think you see the difference between being a good team and the best team.
So what I learned this week is that I didn't learn anything new at all. It's what I always suspected coming in, which is I think Atlanta is the best team in the National League, maybe the best team in all of baseball. I think the Braves are going to win at least 100 games unless they really can take their foot off the gas at the end of September, which they might be able to have that luxury. I also think, though, if you want to look at this optimistically, that if the Phillies can get out of the Phillies' way, could reasonably go into a series again with the Braves and say to themselves, we can beat this team in a series. I wouldn't say they're the favorite. I wouldn't pick them to do it. But as was the case last year, sure, if you shake them out in a 5-game series or something like that, could the Phillies get the Braves again? Yeah, I don't think that it's an impossibility. You look at the way things went down on Tuesday night, especially Ranger Suarez, again, really good. And I think you have to be excited about that as a Phillies fan. 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Had opportunities, had a million opportunities against Spencer Strider. They put consistent pressure on him, but they were unable to bear down and get that big hit, which is something that we've seen for extensive and lengthy parts of stretches for the Phillies this season. And then they kind of punted that game. And I guess that's kind of where I want to start. And we'll just kind of paint the full picture first. And then you come back and you watch yesterday's game and they go toe to toe with the Braves for 9 innings. Aaron Nola was awesome. Elder was awesome. Phillies made a mistake in the 10th inning and Braves walk away with a 2-game sweep. And, but when you look at this and you say, well, the Phillies punched with the Braves for much of that series, but the Phillies do what they do, or the Phillies did what they do, and the Braves did what they do. And can't be all that surprised at the results. So let's take a look at Tuesday night first. You get the start you want from Ranger Suarez. I thought he outpitched Spencer Strider, quite frankly. I certainly had less traffic. He did pitch out of a couple jams, did a nice job. Phillies get to the 7th inning in that game, and I know that the offense is something that we can talk about, but we've talked about those issues so often. I kind of wonder what you think. And we saw this a week prior in Arizona. The Phillies come out in that first game. It's a bullpen game, though, and they have a lead, and the game's tied going into the sixth inning. And they sort of just say, hey, Dylan Covey for a second inning, and they go on to lose. And then they come back and they win the next 3 games, and the next 6 games, and we feel really good about it. And so no big deal. But they come into this first game against the Braves. It's a big series in theory. You're looking up ahead of them. And you get into the 7th inning and you're going Hoffman? Like, what's your reaction to this?
So just so I make sure that we put it out there, I mean, Thompson says after the game, 3 relievers were unavailable. And the 3 relievers that were unavailable were Kimbrel, Alvarado, and Strom.
And yeah.
Oh no, not Kimbrel. I'm sorry. It was Marte. It was Marte, Alvarado, Strom that were not available. So we didn't know that in the moment, right? I mean, in the moment, it was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Why are you going to Jeff Hoffman here when you got all these guys available? You just had an off day yesterday, right? And turns out that with 2 of the 3, which was Marte and Alvarado, they pitched on back-to-back Saturday, Sunday. Even though they had the off day Monday, they didn't want them to throw 3 and 4. And look, you can sit there and roll your eyes, which I do at that personally, but that's the thing in baseball, right? They just don't want pitchers throwing 3 and 4. If they throw back-to-back, they want them to take 2 days off in a row. And then Strom, they're worried about his innings. Okay, great. Got all the qualifiers out of the way. Jeff Hoffman's not the guy to go to there. You go Soto there. You go to Soto. I know it's the 7th inning, and you're thinking we want to go Soto in the 8th and Alvarado and Kimbrel in the 9th. Yeah. But you have to get to the 8th to make it happen, right? So if that means that you got to go Soto for an inning, and hey, maybe it's a quick inning, and you can bring him back out for part of the 8th, even if you don't go full 2 innings with Soto, maybe you go an inning and a third or an inning and 2/3, something, depending on his pitch count. But you've got to go there. You've got to go to Soto, and really, especially because you're coming back around to the top of the order, right? And I get that you're hoping that Hoffman can get through the bottom part of that lineup, right? That's their thought process. Get through the bottom part of the lineup. Then you got Soto to face the top of the lineup, and then Kimbrel to close the game. But so Hoffman walks the first guy he faces, then he gives up the double to pinch hitter Rosario, and they knew they were going to make the pinch hit, go left. They were pinch hitting for Pilar and bring in the lefty there, right? And then gets the out on Michael Harris, but then he faces Acuna, which I asked Thompson why he didn't think to walk him there, set up a double play, and he just said no. I got a 1-word answer. But the reality of the whole thing is that if he gives up 1 base runner, now you're at Acuna. So why are you not going Soto? It doesn't make any sense to me there. And then once, of course, Hoffman gives up the lead, and then it's like, all right, let's just bring in the next guy.
Well, is there a thought that there's going to be an inning uncovered? Because you can't they're probably not going to get through the 3 innings with both Soto and Kimbrel. So they figure there's going to be a gap. And then is it almost like, hey, you know what? We don't want to use either of those 2 pitchers if we don't have to. Like, it's almost like we'd rather build in the extra day of rest, and we're going to use that 7th inning to see if Hoffman can bridge that gap, and then we'll go to them out of necessity. But we don't want to go Soto, insert wild card, and then Kimbrel. Now we've burned Soto, and then we end up losing the game in the 8th. Now we don't know if we're going to have them the next day. Is it kind of almost let's conserve our resources until we absolutely have to use them?
That's what their thought process is, Bob, but I still think it's faulty logic. And I think it's faulty logic because of where they're at in the order. Look, the Braves on Tuesday, because they were facing Suarez, loaded up a bunch of right-handers in a row. That's how they set up their lineup, okay? They're not pinch hitting for anybody in the top of the lineup. So the pinch hitters are going to come at the bottom of the lineup. So prevent them from turning to Rosario in that spot by bringing in the lefty. Are you worried about Kevin Pilar catching up to Soto's 101? It's not going to happen, man. Like, throw Soto out in that spot. And even if Soto does walk a guy or gives up a single or something, would you rather have Hoffman versus Acuna or Soto versus Acuna. And then if you get to the 2 spot, let's even say you give up 2 base runners and you get to the 2 spot and you got Ozzie Albies coming up. He's a switch hitter, but he's significantly better as a lefty. So don't you want him batting right-handed in that spot? Like, to me, the logic just wasn't right. I'd almost rather you if you had to use Hoffman, which obviously that they did, I would rather have Hoffman facing a bunch of guys who are right-handed who are not going to be pinch hit for. And so to me, I just think that and we'll get into this too, because we're going to talk about what happened yesterday. Like, I texted you in advance of that and saying, like, I think that they got the bullpen logic backwards here. And, turned out I was right, but more so because of an error, nevertheless. But I think that sometimes they really overthink it a little bit in the bullpen. I think it's a simple thing that they could just go to and just solve the problem in front of you, and then worry about solving the next problem, and then worry about, as opposed to saying, well, we got to leave that uncovered inning first.
Well, so you know what you have in this game, and so you can talk through, criticize, second guess the way that they handled it. But I would actually walk back before that and say, okay, let's break this down into 2 separate parts. One, you're coming into a series with the Atlanta Braves. If you want to get back into a division race, if you want to even kid yourself that you're in this thing moving forward, you've got to move now. The Phillies erase a 10-game deficit against a team after losing a series starting at the end of June, maybe. But you figure reasonably, if they want to pretend to keep the division within arm's length, there probably has to be some urgency to win this series. So I would ask you this. To what degree is it ridiculous that they came into a game against the Braves in which they figure, hey, runs are probably going to be at a premium facing Spencer Strider. We know what the matchup's going to be, and we're not going to have 3 of our better arms available for the game. Like, philosophically, are you okay with that? The one guy that I would say I'm certainly okay with it is Matt Strahm. And we've talked about this on the show. Like, I actually think he needs to be shut down for a week. And so the fact now that we haven't seen him since Sunday and we're talking Friday, I don't really have a problem with that. And I kind of think he needs that reset. And I don't think it would have been him in that spot for me anyway, given how poorly he's pitched lately. But then the other part of it is, do you walk it back even further and say, listen, this is the science. This is the medical play. We need to make sure that we're preserving these arms long-term. We're just doing it. It's non-negotiable. So then I would argue, do you need to go all in over the weekend against the A's and put yourself in that spot knowing that you're going to run up against this situation? I understand that you have a win in front of you. You can kind of, because what happens if the Phillies go out and they get down 7-0 on Tuesday night, and then you don't go for the win over the weekend, and now you don't even need them on Tuesday. So it's a delicate balance, but knowing what we know, it's kind of easy to sit here and say, well, what the hell, guys? One, if you knew that was going to be the case, then don't put your foot on the gas to that extent.
Yeah, well, and the other thing too, Bob, I can actually look at this from a couple more perspectives too. So you get into that spot, and let's just say you wanted to say, okay, we absolutely have to save Soto and Kimbrel for 8 and 9. Okay, you want to take that approach. I could argue that you say you solve the problem in the 7th inning, and you don't know what happens after that. Maybe you score more runs in the bottom of the 7th, and then it changes everything, right? I mean, so that's why I say you solve the problem in front of you first, and then worry later how you're going to do it. But if even in that case, why not go to Andrew Vasquez in that spot, knowing that they're probably not going to pinch hit. You don't get the better hitter coming off the bench. That's where I have the problem. Yeah, the walk is killer. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to absolve Jeff Hoffman here. You can't have a leadoff walk in the 7th inning there. But you knew Eddie Rosario was coming off the bench. The guy's been hot. He's been hitting. Why would you want to put him into the game? If you bring in Vasquez, they're not bringing Rosario in, and Vasquez he's been good against righties. So why not do that there? So I think that there's a lot of things that they could have done. They could have, yes, you could go back and look at what they did in Oakland and everything else and kind of play that game. I do think that they were still set up in a way that they could get this done even without those 3 guys being available. And they just chose the least good option of all the options that they had. And that's why I was frustrated with it more than anything else. So, I mean, that's why, yeah, of course, it's easy to go back and look at it with hindsight and rose-colored, put the goggles on and say, yeah, I can see it better now. It's more clear now. But at the same time, in the moment, we were texting in the moment, like, what the hell are they thinking?
I mean, I texted you. What did I say? I was like, I pulled one out of dodgeball, right? Like bold strategy, cotton, And it's one of those rare instances where the fan sits at home and they stand up and go, what the hell is this? And you know what's going to happen. And then it happens. And then that kind of gives you, I mean, it was funny on Tuesday night sitting there kind of doing the Twitter scroll, and you see people that are like, this manager doesn't get it. We got to fire him. I'm like, Jesus Christ, guys. Like, they just won 13 out of 15 games. Yeah. Relax. But you know what? Here's a question that I probably asked after that Arizona loss. It's what kind of message does it send? What kind of message does it send in terms of urgency to your clubhouse? Does this game even really matter to us? It's such a half-in approach. And I say this knowing full well that they went 1 for 12 with runners in scoring position, and we probably wouldn't even have to dissect this if they would have just gotten another damn hit in a big spot. But I would back up even further and tell you, I got to say, I don't think that the Phillies viewed that series as this pivotal make or I mean, I know they didn't, because I know how they acted going into it. I see what their plan was. I think the Phillies know realistically that they have no chance to win the NL East. So they're not, when I look at it as a writer, or if you're a fan looking at it, you're saying, well, how do you go into a Braves series not going all in? Because they're probably looking at it and saying, this series is not going to determine our fate this season. What's going to determine our fate is making sure that we're well rested, that we're healthy, because we're not catching the Braves. And they're never going to tell you that, and nor should they. Why the hell would they? If we're all being honest with ourselves, if the Phillies won this series, right? Rain out on Wednesday night, and they pulled to what? Within six games? Is that where they'd be?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. They're not going to catch this team.
No, they're not. They're not going to catch the Braves. We've known that all year. And you're right. I think that there's something to it. They do have the long view, and that's the one thing I like. One thing I do like about this team is that they kind of know who they are, and they take the long view, and they sit there and they say, we're gonna play this out over the course of 162, and we know that we're a good enough team to be there at the end, and if we get in, then we're as dangerous an opponent as anybody can face. So they do have a good plan, a long view plan, but you can't simply rely on that at all times. And the reason I say that is because you have so many games during the season where if you do, using your term, if you do punt it, and I don't think they specifically punted the game, let's chalk it up as a loss early, because it was, they were just like, hey, we'll try and get through this, and if we get through it, we might still steal this one. But it was more that than it was we're going balls to the wall to try and win it. Okay. But you have so many of those games where you don't go all in and lose, and then there's only so many you can have, because then it gets to a point where if you have one too many of those, you might not be playing in October, right? And so that's why you have to really kind of determine when it's time to not have one of those happen. And you have a team on the ropes. The Braves they couldn't figure out Ranger Suarez. Their offense, which is great, is down. It's dormant for a night. That's a time to pounce. That's a game where you take advantage of it. Yeah, you may not catch them to win the division, but you take advantage of it. And we're going to talk like the fact that we're 20 minutes into the show and we haven't even dove into the lineup, which is a real major problem right now in my mind, and I'm sure it is in yours as well. But I think when we're looking at the decision making by the organization, and it's not just the manager, it's everybody together. It's a game plan that they're all putting together. It is a little bit faulty in my mind when you have these kinds of situations crop up and you're saying, well, let's just stick with the long-term plan,
right,
as opposed to improvising in the moment to try and win.
Seizing opportunity. There's an opening here for us. You know what? Let's go get it. And You're right. I told you though I told you on Monday I would be disappointed if they were swept, and that was the assumption that they'd play 3 games.
Right.
If you would have told me though that my 2 starting pitchers were going to give me 12 innings, 1 earned run, and you couldn't find a way to win one of those 2 games, I would say that's disappointing. And so I think there's a lot of different ways that you look at this. You cannot freak out because the Phillies lost 2 games this week to a team that's just simply better. You just can't. It's unfair. I said we were not going to do that, so we're not going to do that. But if you're a fan and you had an opportunity to win both games, you got that starting pitching, and you can't find a way. So that's frustrating. I mean, it's fair to be frustrated.
So the frustration is not in the outcome, right? The frustration is in the process.
Yes, it's in the details. It's
right.
If the Braves come in and they beat you, Aaron Nola has the blow up inning again, and they lose 5-2, and Ranger Suarez just gets out pitched by Spencer Strider in the opener. You go, okay, what are you going to do, right? But the fact that you're in both of these games late, you have opportunities to do it, and you just lose, especially Thursday, in just unthinkable, just stupid fashion. It was just a stupid game. Yeah, I mean, you're a fan, and you can be really happy that they went on this run and pulled themselves back up over 500. But yeah, I think you're allowed to be frustrated with what you saw and how it went down. And you said it. Really, what this all comes down to is the lineup. And I didn't do a ton of prep today. I didn't do a ton of numbers diving, but I'm just going to give you this. The Phillies in the last 4 games have scored 9 runs. 3 of those 9 runs have come with ghost runners on second base to start an inning. So said differently, the Phillies offense has produced 6 runs over its last 4 games in which a runner didn't start at second base.
In regulation time.
In
regular 9 innings.
Time. Yes. So I think that we can sit here and feel really good about the starting pitching. Listen, in June, Phillies across the board, the starting rotation, it's top 5, top 3, in a lot of cases, top 1. They have a 2.34 ERA as a starting rotation in the month of June in 19 starts. White Sox have the second best at 306. So it's the Phillies by a mile. So, if, you look at this thing moving forward and you say, wow, they've really gotten some good things going in this rotation now. I like where they're headed. I still like how they stack up in this wild card race. But at the same time, this lineup is a glaring issue, and it's frustrating. It's disappointing. You can pick apart individual players. They just don't hit enough home runs. They don't walk enough. They don't hit with runners in scoring position consistently. And it has been not underwhelming, not disappointing. It's been shocking how bad this lineup has been for the bulk of the season.
Yeah, it really has. And this is why, Bob, I'll continue to pound this drum and beat this drum for the next 6 weeks, okay, until August 1st, the trade deadline. This is the issue with the team. I'm not worried about pitching. Now, if somebody gets hurt, if there's injuries, whatever, yeah, okay, then we can talk about pitching being an issue for me. I am not worried about where their pitching is right now. The bullpen is good. The starting pitching is finally where we thought it would be, right? And they're showing how good they can be. I am not worried in the least about pitching. Yes, is there a depth concern? Possibly, like I said, with an injury, but I do think that some of these young kids are going to be ready to go soon, and then they could well be the guys that you're going to lean on more so than trying to trade for some schmo that's going to come in here for 8 starts or whatever at the end of the year. But the lineup is a problem. It's a problem because guys are not doing what they are expected to do, and that is where the concern is right now. Trey Turner is becoming an issue for the season, not for the length of this contract. I still think he's a great player. I still think he's going to be really good for this organization. By the time Trey Turner retires at the end of his contract in Philadelphia, he's going to be remembered as a really good player in this city, and people are going to love him. But in the moment, in this season, Trey Turner's killing them. In the moment, in this season, the fact that Bryce Harper cannot hit a home run and cannot hit breaking pitches at the moment is a problem. Will he figure it out? I think he will. I think he's that good of a player that at some point he's going to figure out how he's being pitched and why. I mean, because he's not seeing fastball. He is so good against fastballs this year that they've just decided the hell with it. We're not throwing him any.
Yeah.
and that's how they're getting him out, right? So he's got to, he'll adjust, he'll figure it out. But and you also got to think that, okay, his power is not there because he's coming off of that arm injury. It really is a thing. He's hitting the ball hard. He's hitting line drives when he does make contact. The Bryce Harper swing has not changed. It's still there, but it's a concern and it's a problem in the moment. And then you have the other guys who are just ridiculously inconsistent. And I mean Alec Boehm and JT Realmuto. Schwarber's been better this month. Obviously, it's June, but it's not like last June. It's good, but not that good. Okay. So you have those. Brandon Marsh, okay, he had 5 hits against the Braves, but that was like him coming out of hibernation because he had struck out in 25 of his previous 49 plate appearances before those 2 games. So he has not looked good. Stott's been fine. I'm not going to complain about Stott. And you go, Cody Clemens is Cody Clemens. But I mean, really, and Castellanos, boy, did he have a bad game yesterday. The point is that they're just not, they're not producing anywhere. I don't think they have a 2-WAR hitter at this point on the roster. And that's, at this juncture in the season, that's got to be a big time 3-alarm fire, right?
Well, what you think is that when you look at their lineup and you come into the season, you say, wow, there are so many players in this lineup that are capable of carrying this team for a week, for 2 weeks, where if 2 of them sputter, there's 3 other guys that can take over. And that's where you felt like, wow, you never really see a lineup fire on all cylinders for a prolonged period of time. It's unrealistic to expect guys to each hit 350 together for 2 weeks. It just doesn't work that way. But when JT Realmuto goes cold, you think Kyle Schwarber can go off. When Kyle Schwarber goes cold, it's going to be Bryce Harper. It's going to be Trey Turner. And then you really felt good about the progression of Alec Boehm. And it just has not materialized that way. You've had wild, wild swings, and it's not just the regular ebb and flow. It's not just that's baseball. You've had this lineup just shut down at times all together, all at once, and very rarely do they heat up in bunches where 3 or 4 of them are even going hot at the same time. And the numbers don't lie. I mean, listen, they're 19th in runs per game. I'm actually surprised that they're 12th in slugging percentage. That is high based on the way that I've comprehended this offense this year. They're 16th in on-base percentage. Yeah, they're a top 10 team in batting average, but they're 23rd in walks. And they've hit 20, they're 21st in homers. They've only hit 78 home runs as a team this season. So this was the strength of the team coming in. This is what you were building this team on. We're just going to bop you over the head. And they can't do it. They're not doing it. And I don't know if it's a matter of saying, listen, we're not at the midway point yet. In time, it will even itself out. I get it. There's a lot of talent here. So if that's what you're relying on, okay. But you thought maybe they were getting over that hump when they went on this win streak. And you started to see it turn a little bit against the A's last weekend, even as they were completing that sweep. And in the moment, you're not going to pick it apart because they had won 6 straight games. A sweep on the road is a sweep on the road. I don't care if you're playing a historically bad team or not. Those A's starting pitchers on Friday and Sunday, decent arms. But to not hit Saturday, to not finish on Sunday with much, and then it rolls right over into that Atlanta series. It's been disappointing here.
Do you remember earlier in the season when the Phillies, I think they had like a run where they were like 1 for whatever, with runners in scoring position, and Kevin Long came out and said, it's unfair because it's such a small sample size, to complain about that. It was like only 4 games or something, blah, blah, blah. I want to know, Kevin Long, is it a small sample size anymore? The Phillies have played 73 games. They've had 727 plate appearances with runners in scoring position. Their OPS ranks 28th in baseball at 672. Only the Kansas City Royals and the Padres, surprisingly, are behind them. Even the Oakland A's have a better OPS with runners, and the Detroit Tigers, the 2 awful offenses that we've seen this month. Both teams are better than the Phillies with runners in scoring position. If you don't think it's a problem in a 4-game stretch, Is it a problem after 73 games and 727 plate appearances? Is it okay to sit there and say this is an issue now? Because I do think it is.
Do you feel like in hockey, it's kind of a side conversation, but do you feel like in hockey when things aren't going well and you observe it, you kind of know, hey, I've watched enough here to know that this is a problem. It's real.
Yeah.
Do you get waved off in hockey the way that you do in baseball? Because you talk to players, you talk to coaches. I talk to guys off the record. I've talked to some people in the organization recently, and privately, they're like, dude, come on, you don't get it. Like, you don't get it. You're not a player. You're not a coach. You don't understand how this works. Like, it's just baseball. And I'm like, at what point are you allowed to criticize or critique anything that happens with a Major League Baseball team? Is it okay ever?
No, you get some of that pushback in hockey too. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of times I think what happens is we as reporters or journalists or whatever we want to call us anymore in today's society, but we get put into buckets, and then the bucket that we get put into is we react to the moment and really don't look at it. We don't look at that big picture, right? And so, okay, fine. I get it. I agree that sometimes is the case because, we're always looking for an angle and we're always looking for a story and we're always looking for something to put out there for conversation and for, to have some back and forth so that we can have these podcasts and really talk about it, right? So I understand when we get pushback from the teams, no matter what the sport is. I get it. But at this point, we are 73 games into the season, and you are among the worst teams in baseball at a particular thing. I don't think it's wrong at this juncture to point that out and to say that this is a chronic issue. They can push back all they want, but the reality is what it is. We're not making this up. The numbers are there for us to look at it.
Here would be my counter. They go through these stretches and they look terrible with runners in scoring position. You start to say, this is a problem. They really struggle with this. And there is that pushback of like, it's a small sample size. Relax. It's only May. It's only June. And then they have a 4-game stretch where they just mash, right? And and then the response is, see, told you. I'm like, okay, well, that's a small sample size that you're basing this bounce back off of. Oh, well, wait a minute. See, I told you, just be patient. Oh, okay. Well, then what happens for the next week after that? And then, so it's like funny. You can't have it both ways. When something goes well and you're playing well for a little bit or you're doing something for a little bit, I don't want to hear, see, you overreacted, because now I'm sitting in a position of strength in my criticism saying, oh, we're talking about 70 plus games versus your sporadic little bumps where, yeah, it looks all right. So I think if you're taking and it's not like it's not writer, reporter, fan versus team. It's just this is my observation. I think I see this. And am I as smart as you are? No. Did I play the game at professional level? No. Did I coach the game at professional level? I didn't. Totally understand. But I know what I'm looking at here a little bit. I know that this team doesn't bear down in big spots situationally. And that doesn't mean that they won't in the second half. I'm not rooting for them to fail. Like, there's none of that. But it's just a matter of, like, let's call it what it is, man. These guys have underachieved this year. And someone at some point needs to come up with a solution or answer for it.
Yeah. And Bob, to be honest with you, it's weird because if you start breaking them down, it's really that they're just not getting, it's not that they're just not getting the hits, right? I mean, because you could sit there and say, well, they're a little bit better batting average wise. They're actually top half of the league in these situations and working a walk when there's a runner in scoring position. So it's not like they're just going up there and hacking at bad pitches and just going and sitting right back down again. They're just not getting enough hits, and they're certainly not getting extra base hits. And that's the thing more than anything else. And this kind of goes back to the power conversation we had on Monday, where it was like, is there Schwarber's already got 20, but will anyone else on this current roster reach 20 home runs for the season at this point? And that's a worry. Unless you're playing a game playing baseball like the old style St. Louis Cardinals, where you get on base and then you run like the wind, right? And steal bases, bunt runners, make things happen. And unless you're doing that on a regular basis, you can't win that way. You have to play that way to win that way. And if you're not hitting home runs and then you're not doing you're not playing small ball, then what are you?
I mean, here's what I can give you. The Phillies with runners on base this year, just at least one. I'm not talking about the 3-run homer, which we know they have not hit many of those, but just any runner on base. They are 25th in baseball this season in home runs with a runner on base, 28 home runs. And if you're looking for some context, you go, okay, well, what does that mean? Are the top 25 teams there bunched up by 10 home runs? No. The Atlanta Braves have hit 64 home runs with a runner on base this year. And that they lead by a wide margin, to be fair, but the Rangers 54, Dodgers 52, Cardinals 51. So
the Cardinals.
And the problem with this is you go, okay, well, that, like you said, if they're built on athleticism and taking extra bases and they steal, this team is predicated. This lineup is supposed to do that. They're supposed to get on base, high on base percentage, a lot of dangerous hitters, and they're supposed to mash with runners on. They're supposed to hit the 2-3-run homer, and they're just not doing it. They haven't done it all year with any consistency. So to see them down there when you have a team that's built on this with the likes of the Nationals, the Rockies, Royals, Pirates, Guardians, I mean, come on, man. And that's really what I think has held this team back. We've talked about the rotation, and up until the month of June, it had been bad. And certainly, I think it depleted the bullpen. I think some guys have flamed out, the Brogdons of the world, the Bilottis of the world. They just got beat to death because of the rotation deficiencies and guys not starting the season strong. But now you do the power ranking of problems, and it really does come down to this lineup. And maybe this weekend against the Mets, all's well again, and we can say long view, the Phillies have won 16 out of 20. It's all good when we're talking next week, but there's got to be some solution here. And I don't think, and I've heard it a little bit lately, especially with Cody Clemens kind of coming back to earth, that it's Jake Cave, it's Derek Hall, both of whom have swung the bat all right at Lehigh, but I just don't think it's an internal solution. I don't know. I just don't know how you fix this right now.
They have to go out and get it. And that's why, I wrote it. We've talked about it. I don't want to relitigate it. But the Phillies' main concern between now and August 1st is finding power for their lineup from someone else. They're going to have to trade for it. But they may have to do more than one person at this point. It may have to be two guys. It may have to be, add a bench bat who can play with some regularity and not get exposed, like in Mundo Sosa or Cody Clemens is starting to show like a little bit. I still think Clemens is fine. I still think Clemens can get you by. And I think Clemens is okay to be that lefty off the bench. Maybe he can actually become kind of a good left-handed pinch hitter, given a little bit of time in that role. I still think that could be a thing. So I don't think it's a complete, like, oh my God, we got to replace all these players, but they need it. They need right hand. They need power, period, from no matter what side. But I think they're better off getting it from the right side. Here's one thing that I actually heard Jack Fritz say on the radio. And, we had talked about them needing to get it, and it should probably be a corner infielder because then, you can move Bohm wherever. But in lieu of, what happened in the game yesterday, where, you basically had two gaffes in the outfield, one that really hurt the team, the other one didn't. But both took place in left field. Brandon Marsh calling off Schwarber on a ball that was absolutely the left fielder's ball, and then he drops it. And then Schwarber not even catching a ball hit right at him in the 10th inning. That kind of opens the floodgates there. Maybe if they can get, if Harper does come back to play first base, start playing first base in July, and he shows it.
Gun to your head. Bryce Harper playing first base for this team this season?
I think he has to now. You asked me this. If you asked me this a week ago, I probably would have said no. But I think he has to try. And the reason I say this is, and this is what I think what Fritz was going for, and I think it's smart. If he could play, if he could show that he could play the position, even just average play the position, you don't necessarily have to go get a first baseman or a third baseman. You can go and get an outfielder. And that opens up, I think, a greater span of possibilities
Right.
for Dave Dombrowski, Sam Fold, and their team to go get somebody. And so I think that's going to be something that they really have to try. I know Harper said he's not close. He threw from 120 feet for the first time the other day. It's going to take a little bit of time. But I think that they have to try it right after the All-Star break. I really do. I think that that's how soon it has to happen. And if it proves to be something that he can do, then I think that gives you more options. But they need bats. It's crazy to think that we are on June 23rd, Bob, with this team and this lineup to be saying this is the most glaring need. But I think it more than, and I think you talk about gaps in standings and statistics and things along those lines. The gap in what this team needs right now is from bats versus arms is, in my mind, vast.
Yeah. Well, I think the timeline on Harper playing first base is important, and I think you sort of hinted at it there. It's got to be pretty shortly after the All-Star break because you have to figure out, one, is he physically healthy enough to do it? And then can he do it with any effectiveness? There's no guarantee that I know fans think that first base, you can just stick a trash can there and it's fine. But as we've seen here in recent years, first base defense can hurt, and it's not a gimme. It's not a layup. So there are two parts of that equation that you have to be able to answer, and it's going to matter how they approach the trade deadline and how they try to go about acquiring that bat. And if he can't do it because he's A, unhealthy, or not healthy enough to do it, or B, he's just incapable of playing the position at a league average level, then that's going to alter the approach of how they try to remedy this issue. The thing that I guess we haven't talked about, we've sort of just mentioned it in passing, is this play with Kyle Schwarber in the 10th inning. And I don't know what else to say about it other than in real time, I kind of said, holy shit, like how did he miss that ball? And I don't want to beat up on him. He takes the right approach after the game. We know he's accountable. We know he's going to stand up there and say, I blew it. I should have caught it. It wasn't on Marte. It was on me, because that's the kind of guy he is. And you're going to get that from him. The accountability is there. I don't think that he left for the day and said, oh, well, not a big deal. I think he probably wore that, and he was probably pretty hard on himself. That being said, the Phillies cannot proceed much longer with Kyle Schwarber roaming left field, at least late in games. And I saw some people saying yesterday, why was he in the game at that point? He shouldn't have been in the game. They should have subbed him out for defense. And I don't think that you can do that
in a nothing game.
Yeah, first of all, at the time, it's 1-0. So they're still within – you expect to score a run in extra innings. So you're not protecting a lead. You have to score that run. You're looking to score multiple runs. The Phillies are struggling offensively. He's probably the one guy in this lineup right now that when he comes to the plate, you can almost, I don't want to say expect a home run, but reasonably hope that he's going to hit a home run. I don't think that you're in a position with this offense being as dismal as it's been to sub out Kyle Schwarber late in games, especially if you're not holding a lead, and especially if it's any time before the 8th or 9th. And I know we're talking about extra innings yesterday, but I didn't think that was the right time to sub him out for defense at all. And if the Phillies are going to start doing that, wait until you see the offense then.
I don't think you can sub out Schwarber for defense unless you have the lead.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. And it can't be, and it depends on what the lead is, but you really can't.
4-2, 5-2 in the 8th inning or later, I'm cool with it. But under any other situation or any other circumstance, they can't do that.
You got to keep them in the lineup. You just got to keep them in the lineup.
You got to live with it. I mean, you have to live with it. At one point this week, he came in with a 1,000 OPS in the month of June. You're not taking that out of your lineup. I know he was 0 for 5 yesterday. It was a horrible game. But there's just no way you can get around it. You have to live with this. I also suspect, and I'm not sitting here trying to make excuses, because you don't have to be mobile to make that play yesterday. That was not a matter of, he just couldn't get to the ball. He just doesn't have the range. That was, the ball's in your glove and you're standing up, catch it. He's hurt, right? Like, there is a lower body injury or a lower body issue with him. He was not good defensively last year at all, but this is a different level. He looks like he is just limited.
Yeah,
Straight.
I don't know what it is, Bob, but I mean, it's been there since spring training. He's not moved well since spring training. And when we were down there, we were asking about it. And it was like, nah, he's fine. He'll be all right. He'll be fine. And then it was like, oh, he's feeling good. He's great. And he even says, I'm feeling okay. I'm good. But I mean, for 3 months now, we've been asking these questions, and it's like, nope, it's fine. Everything's fine. And, maybe at the end of the year, they'll finally tell us it's something. Maybe we find out at the end of the season it's something that he's going to get taken care of or whatever. Is it a knee? Is it a hip? Is it whatever? I don't know. Who knows? But I think it's more and more obvious that it's a problem out there for him. Like, he can't move like he used to.
So I was having a conversation with a former player, and we were talking about Schwarber specifically, and my hypothesis is that he's hurt. And then I said, well, why not just say, hey, I'm dealing with whatever. I have an issue. There's something going on. I can play through it. Obviously, I can play through it. I've hit 20 homers this year. I need to be out here for the team. I'm going to gut it out. We're all in this together. What's the downside of just saying, and I'm not saying this is the injury, but what's the downside of saying, yeah, I got some knee inflammation. It's limiting my range. I feel it pretty much with every step I take. Or I've been battling a hamstring thing off and on this season, but I'm healthy enough to play through it. And that's why I've just got to make that play. I'm embarrassed for myself. Like, we know the accountability's there. What's with is there any benefit to suppressing that information if you're a pro athlete? Because I almost think if I'm a fan and I'm watching it earlier in the game, he can't get to the ball in the gap that Marsh has to go over and get. I said, all right, well, at least I get it. Like, do you give them a little bit more grace? These guys not want that? Do they think it's going to work against them? Like, what's the deal?
I don't know what the mentality is in baseball. Like, I can kind of understand it in sports that are contact sports a little bit, right? You don't want the other team to know what your injury is because there's a way that they can attack it a little bit. You know what I'm saying? I'm not certain that if you have a knee, like if you have a knee injury that you're dealing with, or a hamstring injury that you're dealing with, it kind of makes you gimpy or a little bit slower. Like, how does that impact you from a strategy perspective if you're thinking the other team can take advantage of it?
If you're the Mets this weekend, you're not saying, well, I know that he's had some knee inflammation. Let's really attack left field. You've got more than 70 games of him roaming around out there being a bad defensive player. It's not going to you're not going to do anything differently because you know this. You see how he's moving, and that's enough.
Right, exactly. That's my point. Like, I mean, I don't know how it impacts you in baseball. Like, I kind of, maybe for a pitcher, maybe I can understand if there's something that a pitcher's maybe dealing with that it could affect, velocity or whatever. Okay, fine. You don't want that kind of getting out there. But I don't think that there's any reason to hide it other than machismo.
Well, this player said it wasn't about that. He said that the fans would find a way. Former player, I'll say, the fans will find a way to use that against him, that they won't cut him slack, that he's gotten through an injury. It's that, well, he shouldn't even be out there then. Why are they playing him? And that they would start banging the drum.
Does it matter what the fans? Does it matter what the fans say? Does it really matter what the fans say? I mean, but so the point, like, to me, that's where we come in, right? That's our job at this point. So if in fact let's just say he's injured and he's playing.
And by the way, we don't know that he's injured. We're just
right.
That there could be an issue. Yeah.
Right. Let's just say that's the case. That's where we come in to say, all right, guys, we have to understand that this guy's gutting it out and he's playing through something, and that's why it's a problem. But so, that's what we're there for. And then if if the fans say, well, then he shouldn't be out there, well, then who are you putting out there instead?
Yeah.
And how's that making your team better?
Yeah, we'll bench Kyle Schwarber in his 45 home run pace, and we'll call up Jake Cave, who, by the way, probably should be up here, but is blocked because lefty
right
with this damn roster. But I just don't see an alternative solution. I think that the Phillies are best served if he continues to play through whatever. And if he's not playing through anything, then he's just got to be better. But if he is limited, then I still think that their best case scenario is to play him in left field, as bad as it is. And I will acknowledge that him missing that ball yesterday would have nothing to do with any injury. That was the most glaring example of them being deficient defensively in left field. That was not that had nothing to do with an injury yesterday. It was just a terrible play at a horrible time. They were able to get away with this stuff last year, and it just feels like they're having a little bit more of a difficult time dodging their weaknesses for whatever reason in 2023.
Yeah. And speaking of that incident, I just want to bring up what I texted you yesterday, because I just barely mentioned it, but I wanted to bring this up because this kind of circles back to the first thing we were talking about on the podcast today. As we were approaching the ninth inning, and it was between innings during a commercial break, I'm texting you. I'm saying, I know they're going to go to Kimbrel here. And then if you go to the 10th inning, then Marte is your guy in the 10th. But considering where they were in the line, and this is just managing in the moment, thinking in the moment, knowing where they were in the lineup, wouldn't it be better to have Marte with a clean inning, nobody on base, and have Kimbrel come up or pitch when you have to have a runner on base and the top part of that Braves lineup coming up? Wouldn't it have been better to flip it? And because I thought that Marte being put into that high leverage, really high leverage situation, no game hasn't had a run yet. Now all of a sudden you come in, there's a runner on second with nobody out, and you got to pitch against the best hitters on this team in that situation. You're probably less likely to get the strikeouts than you are with Kimbrel, and let Marte come in and pitch his inning with nobody on base, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And, and yes, you're still going to have an opportunity to maybe score a run to win the game in the bottom of the inning. I just felt like it should have been the other way around. They stay with their game plan. They're conventional. This is how we do it. And look, Marte wasn't great in the 10th inning. I mean, he should have got out of it with only letting up the one run, but that's what happens. That's what happens. And I just don't think that there's a lot of creative thinking happening. I think this is what our game plan is. We've put our game plan together. We did all our thinking pregame. We're not thinking in the moment.
That's a concern. I am not being dismissive of you. I know in text messages yesterday I was dismissive of you. I understand what you're saying. I hear you. But I'm going to give you two numbers.
Go ahead.
0 and 3. And those two numbers represent 0 runs in 9 innings and 3 hits in 9 innings.
Oh, yeah.
And listen, there's going to come a day where what you're talking about is going to apply in an 8-8 game. And I won't be able to say this, but I just cannot bring myself to even care because of what I watched for 9 innings offensively prior.
And you're right. But you're right, Bob. I want to say that up front. I concede the white flag. Here you go. 1,000%. You're correct. This is on the hitting. More like you shouldn't be in a nothing game in the 10th inning. Right? That's on your lineup. Your pitching has done their job for the day, in my mind. They shut out the best team in baseball for 9 innings, and you couldn't give them one freaking run.
Braves had the exact same offensive output yesterday. They each scored a run that they should have scored.
Yeah.
The Braves scored 4 more runs because the Phillies didn't catch a fly ball. That was the difference in the game.
Yeah.
So I understand, and I do think it's worth calling out because there's probably going to come a time, maybe this weekend, maybe in 2 weeks from now, where you can say, this is what I'm talking about. And it was in a 6-5 game. It's when they were swinging the bats well. And I know that these issues are independent truly of one another, but just in the moment, and as I process, I'm like, come on, Yeah. I think we want to try to get to the finish line here pretty quickly. I know we're actually the time where you start to make a move to Citizens Bank Park. Real quick, Mets this weekend. I'll just go back to what I said earlier. You better win this series.
Yeah.
You better win this series. I'm okay with the Braves. I mean, I'm not okay with it, but I understand the Braves thing. You're better than this team. They have wiped the floor with you for 2 years now. They swept you earlier this month or last month and crossing over into June. Enough already with this. And you look at the pitching matchups and you have to feel pretty good about it. Senga, Walker, the way Walker's been going lately. All right. Sanchez is wild card, but Carrasco has been brutal. And then I guess in the finale, what do we have? Wheeler, and are they going Verlander or Scherzer?
Scherzer.
Yeah. So
Scherzer.
And I guess that's a toss up, but Wheeler's better than Scherzer at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So come on, because while you weren't playing the Braves for division supremacy, while you probably are not competing with that team, you have a chance to take a step forward this weekend and really distance yourself from a bad Mets team. And you can't knock them out anymore, but you can just let them know, hey, you're not as good as we are. It's not happening.
I think this is a little bit of a Waterloo for the Mets in a lot of ways, Bob. I think when you look at the standings, just they just lost 2 of 3 to the Astros, and they were in a couple, the one of the games that they lost, but they're 4 games behind the Phillies right now, and they're if you look at the wild card standings, I think that they're 7 back. This is it for them. Like if they come out of this weekend and they're 8 or 9 or even 10 games out of whatever, I guess it can't be 9. I guess either 8 or 10 out of the wild. Well, unless there's a rain out and the game gets, I guess it could be 9.
It's very possible.
Yeah, it's just possible. So if they're somewhere between 8 and 10 games out of the wild card, I think then they're automatically at that. I think that's it. I think they're done. I think this is their Waterloo. So the Mets are going to come into this series desperate. The Phillies have to match their urgency. And I think that's what's important. More than anything else, they have to match that urgency. And I think that the pitchers are still going to be that. I need the lineup to be that. Yeah. I need the lineup to be urgent too. And I think that you're right. They better win 2 out of 3, if not all 3, or if there is a rain out, just 2, whatever. They need to win 2 games this weekend. I don't care how it's done. Win both if there's only 2. But you can't let the Mets hang around at this point. Just get rid of that team. Goodbye.
Well said. All right, let's jump into one last thing here.
So this is actually kind of related to what happened this weekend or happened yesterday with the Phillies. But to me, and I'm there's going to be a post up on Crossing Broad today. I'm not sure if it'll be up before the podcast is out or after the podcast, but around the same time, whatever. So the error on Schwarber, which according to Baseball's StatCast, which is something the league kind of created, had I believe it was a 96% chance of being caught. 96%. It was originally scored a hit. Mm-hmm. It stayed a hit for the betterment of 24 hours until today. Major League Baseball, earlier this morning, changed it and made it an error and turned it into 5 unearned runs in the 9th inning there. This is a chronic problem in the sport right now, Bob. Scorekeepers all across the league, it's not just in Citizens. I don't want to make it sound like it's the guys at Citizens Bank Park only, but it's all across the league, are no longer calling errors. They're giving out hits for everything. And it's, to me, part of the big marketing PR push by the league to say, look at us, at how much more offense we have in our league now. Look, see, we made the changes to make more offense in the league. And this is how they're doing it. They are basically shaking down their scorekeepers and saying, you're not going to have a job unless you start giving out hits on plays that should be errors. I'll tell you right now, I think Brandon Marsh's play yesterday in left field also should have been an error. It was scored as a double. Okay, that ball is in his glove. Yeah, he ran way too far to catch it. He should have let Schwarber go get it. It should have been an easy fly out. The fact of the matter is he got there and it's in his glove and it scored a double. Yeah. And then you had the Schwarber thing. And the only reason MLB overturned it, I think, was because of the pressure, the public pressure, the national conversation about, oh my God, how can you call that a hit? Because there were national writers who were, Bob Nightingale went off on them, like from USA Today. He went crazy about it. I have a real problem with what baseball is doing to the sport from that perspective, because I think it impacts a lot of people's livelihoods in the game. I mean, let's look at Junior Marte just for a second. Let's imagine he has to wear those 5 or 4 those 4 runs as earned runs. How does that impact his future contracts, right? To say,
yeah, it's not just, I'm not having a good stat line. It's maybe it'll send me down because my ERA is this, and maybe they're not looking at my performance. It's really about that. When you go into arbitration, when you go into negotiating your money later on, I mean, 4 runs for a reliever, it can be huge. Yeah. It could be the difference between your ERA sitting at 6 and your ERA sitting in the high 4s. It has that much of an impact. I think so. In real time, this one was probably as bad as it gets. Yeah. The Schwarber play. My father I mean, my father's pretty tough on me, so he wouldn't have done it anyway. But even like in daddy ball, in high school and in little league, the most forgiving scorer wouldn't say, "Hey, you had a big hit there. It was a double." Or that's an error. There's JV baseball, freshman baseball, middle school baseball. It's an error. He's coming in, he's upright, he misses it. And there's just no other way to score that. And the fact of the matter is that when they in real time assess that play, that's how you know it's coming from a higher level, because nobody in their right mind in real time would process that play and say, hit. There has to be some consideration in your brain as you synthesize that play to say, well, yeah, I mean, I know it's an error, but baseball wants us, or we have been instructed to lean this way. That's the only way. There has to be some higher influence to get you to that point. And that was probably just too obvious. And then it gets blown up on a national scale. I said, oh shit, you know what? We've probably got to walk that back. But I guarantee you that scorer, whoever evaluates the scorers, was probably told privately, good. That's what we wanted. We had to correct it. Okay, no big deal. But that's what we're looking for. There's
Exactly.
no question in my mind.
And that bothers me, Bob, because I think that it's not going to change outcomes. It's not, that from that perspective, the outcome is going to always remain the same. It's going to change statistics. It's going to make you think that something is one way when it's really not. And it's really just part of the whole, and it's the whole plan that they're putting in place here. It becomes even that much more transparent as to look at what we're doing, and it bothers me to no end.
Well, how about this? And I know occasionally I'll bring this into the mix and you say, this is not at the top of my list in terms of concerns, but what if you're betting on this? And there's a lot of different ways you can bet on this. One is total bases, over under X amount of bases, over under run batted in. Will player record that? Will pitcher give up an earned run? There's a lot of different implications in the betting realm of how this stuff gets scored. And while you are leaving, some of this is subjective and you are leaving a degree of it into interpretation, when you have something that's so blatantly obvious and you can be robbed of it, I know that's the risk you take when you play the game, but I kind of feel like that there has to be some legitimacy to this. There has to be some level of understanding that you're going to get a fair shake on these calls. And it matters when there's money involved in regulated markets.
Let me ask you a question. Let's imagine that you had that bet yesterday. But you had a bet yesterday on Junior Marte. you took Junior Marte no run. I'm just saying, let's just imagine that was a bet. I'm not sure anybody in the world had that bet yesterday, but let's imagine you took that bet, right? And then the game happens, and the immediate result on the official scoring is that he allowed 5 or 4 earned runs, and you cash that bet. What happens after they change the scoring? Or vice versa. If you lost the bet, what happens after do you then win it after the fact? Like, what's the
so a lot of sports books will use opportunities like that to go public and say, bad beat, we're refunding these losses, or we are still issuing this as a win. But generally speaking, if there is a change in the way something is scored, they're going to undo the result of the bet. So, I mean,
even if you've already cashed it out?
If you've already cashed it, I mean, I don't know how they go about it, but like if it happens within like a certain amount of time, now if it's a day after proposition, they might just say, all right, the ship has sailed. They might close transactions. You have to look at the fine print of each sports book. They could close transactions end of day. They could say, we will honor the result as of the final pitch of the game. Official rule changes won't be subjected to the way that we grade these games. I mean, there's a lot of different ways they can probably go about it. I would suggest if you're going to bet on props and individual outcomes, you take a look at your house rules. But how about this? I mean, and this is just, this is the price of doing business, but you have the Phillies yesterday. You have under, you jump in real time. You see a pitcher's duel unfolding. You say, I'll go under 2.5 runs for the game. And you see the fly ball go out the left field. And you're like, all right, cool, I'm out of it. And boom.
Yeah.
4 more runs score. So it's I know there's not going to be a ton of sympathy from the general public and the general sports fan about that type of thing, but it is interesting to me.
It is. I find that interesting too.
All right. Well, listen, that gets us out of here at a minute 4, minute 5 by the time I'm done all of my rambling here. So thank you for tuning in to Crossed Up. You can follow us on Twitter. The show count is @UpPhillies, @AntSamPhillies, where you can find Anthony, and then I'm @BobWankleCB. Make sure that you check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or anywhere else you get your shows. And we will talk to you on Monday.